Hello, everyone. I'm Larry Buckland, pastor at Suncrest United Methodist Church, and I have my friend Mark Markle with me, and we want to welcome you to an episode of the Rev Rambles On.
Hey, Larry.
Hey, Mark. It's good to be with you. We had taken a little bit of hiatus. I want to hear how you went on a trip. I also had a little bit of laryngitis and some busyness, and so I know it's hard to imagine me not talking, right? I saw the look.
Okay.
Yeah, one Sunday morning was really bad. I had done 2 outdoor weddings, one on Friday, one Saturday, and by the Saturday night, by the time I was getting back to a WVU football game that was at 8 p.m., by the time I got to the football game, I had no voice.
Holy cow.
So that wasn't fun for me to not be able
Couldn't
to
cheer.
Yeah. And everybody the next day in church thought it was because of the game that I'd lost my voice.
It was because of the weddings.
It was because of the weddings and I guess some outdoor allergies, possibly. But it took me a little while to regain that. So how was your trip?
It was wonderful. We were gone for 5 weeks and we got to visit with relatives. We traveled to some spectacular parts of this country, the national parks, national monuments. If you have a chance, go to the Utah and the Nevada national parks. There's some incredibly unbelievable geology there.
Nice.
The other place I would really urge anybody, if they have the chance, is to go to the Olympic Peninsula and the Olympia National Park. That it's kind of similar but totally different. It's a park that you can't drive through, so you kind of do spokes. You go in and come out, you go in and come out, but you go in, you can walk for half a day, and you go into another part. There's still trees, and there's some incredibly tall. There's trees as tall as a football field there, but the whole environment's different. It's a wonderful place. I met a person in one of the national parks. It was from Germany, actually. And we were talking about what they were doing. And he said, you Americans are incredibly fortunate. If somebody had the foresight to put these things aside so they could be enjoyed by generations to come. In our country, there were huge forests. All we can do is read about them. And in many cases, we don't even have pictures other than drawings. So he was enjoying the national forest, the national parks too.
That's incredible. I'm so glad you got to do that. And it sounds like you, and I talked to your wife, Val, it sounds like you both had a wonderful experience.
We did that, and we visited with friends and relatives. So
that makes it even better.
Combine 2 and 2.
That's right. Well, I'm glad to be back on the Rev Rambles On and glad to have you.
Well, let's go on to it then if we're ready to go.
I'm ready.
You've been having a sermon series on do unto others, and you started with kindness and went to compassion, and this past week you did humility. And I went back and rewatched all 3 of those, and it struck me that there were a lot of commonalities. There are differences, but there were a lot of things that if we were going to be kind and compassionate and have humility, there are things we can do that fit all those things. And I would like to talk about those.
Let's do it. One
of the big things was listen and talk. Every one of your sermons said you need to stop and listen and talk. Don't talk about, no, I'm sorry. You actually said talk about your differences, and you might find you have similarities where you wouldn't have expected it. Can you talk a little more about that? Because when I think about that, that's a scary thing for me to invite somebody to sit down who I know has a different opinion.
Sure.
Not that I hate the person, but I just don't look forward to that.
Of course, when I think about the series, it's called Do Unto Others. As we talk about those attributes, we were intentional about having this series before and during and after the election, the 2024 general election. And when you think about people especially living in West Virginia, you're going to have people that are all over the spectrum politically. And we're also going to have, I've lived in different parts of the state. I grew up in southern West Virginia. I have lived in Huntington. I've lived in Ravenswood. I went to school in Pittsburgh Theological for my master's. Lived in Morgantown a couple of times. And so in Fairmont for a long Fairmont, Fairmont 17 years, and that's how long I was where I grew up, 17 years. So different parts of the state, different lengths of time, and I can tell you people are different, even in the state of West Virginia. We got a lot of cultures, and I have found that people that I don't always idealistically agree with on issues and politics, that there might be other things that I can have common ground with. And it can be as simple as favorite place to go eat, favorite restaurant to spend time with, a coffee shop, favorite sporting event, and have a commonality of a team to cheer for. However, we may disagree on politics or religion, but also, I have found that sometimes the same people that I would disagree with politically were a part of the church that I was the pastor of. And often we would find common ground in missional opportunities. And the listening and being able to do things together, sweat together, if you will, or whatever you want to call that, of being in a small group and Bible study together and having opportunities to say, we are going to disagree on scripture and different things. But if you will listen to people then, and you get to know people, you may actually love them.
Actually, that's insightful for me, because as I listened to this sermon, I was thinking you were saying you can find common ground on these political differences, but you broaden the perspective immensely. Where do you like to eat hamburger? Where do you like to have a beer?
Yeah, that's right.
What's your favorite sports team? I mean, those are links way apart from politics or theology or philosophy that we can still share and recognize each other.
Well, let's just think about even the state of West Virginia, as we know, since 2000. And I'm reminded, my son also is a freshman in college right now, and he's taking a political science class. What a year to do that. And so he was asking me questions. He said, I cannot believe that West Virginia used to be a blue state. And then I said, yeah, it changed in 2000, Al Gore. It's been red ever since. And so when I think about that, if you know someone that is blue, that is affiliated, that would register as a Democrat, and you go to Mountaineer Field with 60,000 fans, you're probably, because of what our map looks like, if you are blue, you're probably a minority in Morgantown on that Saturday afternoon.
Yeah.
But you're there.
That commonality in the
cheering your gold and blue that day, because you're not in the midst of politics. So people that are high-fiving and hugging and singing country roads together may really deeply disagree on issues. And that sometimes when you get to those issues, it's unfortunate that sometimes we will have a complete divide. And what I encourage, and I'm not trying to end this podcast so quickly, what I encourage is, because it is challenging for me, it's challenging, it's stressful, and because I have beliefs and values that reasons why my why is why I vote or choose to vote for a particular individual or individuals. Don't always agree with everyone. So when that happens, I have to keep in mind that God, with God's eyes, God sees kindness and compassion and humility, and what we're going to be talking about next time, respect. How do we do that? And that means that God loves all of us.
I think that's an important point. The way I think about it, and you've mentioned it in all three sermons, is that to recognize that the person you are talking to or dealing with is a child of God, has God's offer of grace, and is in that light just like you. And I have actually used that when I've gotten in a heated. I don't count to 10, but I said, "Wait a minute, Mark. It's a child of God. Listen. You may disagree with it, but have the humility to listen to what they have to say." It's an important point, I think.
Yeah, we've seen a couple examples that were shown in the messages, from, and I actually heard feedback pro of the celebration of looking back at a time gone by when political people were able to, as Reagan, I'm paraphrasing, talked about when he was awarding Tip O'Neill, let's go after each other on the issues, but still be friends. And people were able to celebrate that we're able to do, but they also have a hard time thinking because they feel like it's so different today, and that it is a hard time to just go after each other on the issues because it becomes more in our what we watch and what we see and how people react and respond. And so it becomes more challenging. And so I know that in some ways, the idea of doing unto others, that golden rule, is something that we all try to live by. Well, at least we should.
We aspire to.
We aspire to, but we're not perfect in it. And I think that's why it's important. The reminder of it is how should we? Now, when we look on the political spectrum and not see that, it's easy for us to do, to just join in.
Yeah, it's way too easy to just get into the language and kind of feedback what you're hearing. And stepping away from that is hard. Particularly in terms of some of the language that has been used this time around. But that's a challenge we have. You talk about somewhere, if I got my notes, it says, we declare we're Christians, and you have to live by that and honor it, and people watch and hear. So, Paul says, watch what you do because others are watching you.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of things I'd like to talk about. You talk about kindness. Do an act of kindness with no expectation of reward. And it started me thinking about the power of kindness. You mentioned it a bit, but I elaborated on it in my brain, and I was thinking, there's two ways kindness goes. The how does it feel to receive kindness? If you do something for something, to be the one that receives it. And then there's the other half of it. How does it feel to give kindness, to do an act of kindness? That's a two-way exchange of I don't know what to call it, emotion or just good feeling. And it's hard sometimes to remember that when you do an act of kindness, there's not just you feeling good and the person feeling good, but the both of you feeling good. That's a connection. That's a connection.
And that's the commonality of humanity that we hope for. That's the picture of God's creation. We read the scripture of the lion laying with the lamb. And that's the perfect shalom peace that we yearn for.
We touched on this earlier, but I'm gonna ask you to elaborate, or maybe we can debate. I'm not sure if that's the right word. We talk about reaching out and saying, let's talk, but that entails risk.
It does.
A big risk. I might end up changing my position, and then where have I been all these months or years or wherever it's been? I might get rejected and saying, I don't want to talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
And I might not be able to keep my cool. I might blow up. The idea of opening oneself up that way is scary to me. I'm a natural introvert. That's not something I'm going to do without some effort. How do we find the strength to pull that off?
I don't know that it necessarily is going to happen with a stranger or someone you don't know well.
No, it'd be harder with somebody I know well.
Well, that could be. I think someone that you still feel connected to is someone that you love and care about, and you're able to talk. I don't know about you, but more often than not, politics come up with people I'm around. And that is in people that I love and care about. And sometimes it is not, we're not on the same page. What we believe and feel. And there have been times that we have to acknowledge that, okay, this is about as far as we could take this right now, because we love and care for one another, and to be able to share where we are, but not be apologetic about that. But yet the key, I think, still is listening to someone's why. You don't have to come away with their changing your mind. You may even be ready to say, I can't believe you think that, and shake your head. But are you able to look across the table and still look in the eyes of the person that's always been your friend or a person that's been your family? And that's what I try to do. I'm not perfect at it. I get flabbergasted and frustrated. And I think I've heard from a lot of people in these weeks right now that are having a hard time and are grieving and are trying to find why can family separate or friends lose friends over this. We showed a short video in one of the sermon clips about two people from a church that got together and talked, and it was set up for a video, for that. And they were surprised that they could listen to each other and know that they could plan to have coffee later after having the discussion. I think one of them said, when they asked, what did you expect? And one said, I didn't expect you to be so nice.
Yeah, I picked up on that right away. How can you believe it and still be so nice? That's the reality of child of God, right?
Time and time again. I mean, people will get tired of hearing the story, but I tell it all the time, is that there's a man that I packed lunches with every Tuesday and on a former appointment during COVID season. And he and I completely disagreed. And he really loved to talk about it a lot more than I did. And I would listen. But what helped me, even though my beliefs were different from his, I saw his love for God and for people, and especially the homeless, home insecure community in Fairmont, and also those who were food insecure, and how much he cared. And sometimes I even then was challenged because I felt like some of our political thoughts seemed completely foreign. How do you have these political thoughts when you are this way? I would even go there with him.
Yeah, what did he come back with?
Well, he just thought he was right. He just thought he was right.
Most of us do, so you can't hold back.
And he thought I was wrong. But at the same time, we had a commonality of the church and serving people in that community.
Having talked about that in all the sermons, it was the election is coming. This is what we need to do as we approach the election. Elections happened.
It has.
And now, to me, the challenge is, now that it's over, there are results mostly in, how do we go forward with those who were pleased and those who weren't?
Yeah, I'm looking something up right now because while I'm talking, because I remember seeing something even before the election that made me think this is the way to try to be as best as we can. And so as I'm going to ramble here, Mark, as I look, I'm going to...
You're good at it, so go ahead.
I'm going to work on that. But it is... I can tell you that I believe, for me, I knew a lot of folks, let's say, are doing this series all across the country. Do unto others. A lot of people are doing it. And as I think about that, I was surprised when I saw that people were ending the series right before the election. The series was ending. They started the 5-week series and then they were going on. And so it's challenging to think of it that way, that, all right, the series is over. We don't need to worry about anything anymore. I know that's not what people were thinking. I think idealistically, they thought we'll have this series up until the election, right, and then we'll move on. And also the time of the year. We're getting close into Thanksgiving and all of those things. And so do you continue to talk about it? I'm glad we started a little bit closer to the election and talked about it. And now we're moving forward after. And I can tell you the Sunday after the election, to me, is the hardest because we're going to have, again, in West Virginia, and in Morgantown, West Virginia, we're going to have people that are blue and people that are red in the sanctuary, watching online. We're going to have people that are very excited about the result of the election. We're going to have people that are in sorrow and grief. And what I hope is, regardless of which side you are on of that, you will think about the other, not just yourself, but you'll think about the other.
Think about the other.
The person that may be on the opposite end of the spectrum. The person that's celebrating ought to be thinking about the person that's grieving.
Thinking about in what way?
In a caring, loving way of kindness, of compassion, humility, and respect, and love. And when you think about the other that way, hopefully we see all those attributes during this time. Whether you're celebrating or whether you are in feeling of fear that I've heard, a feeling of what's next, all kinds of emotions that are coming out. So to me, the sermon after the election is the hardest because you're speaking to a lot of different people, but yet we're saying, okay, now what does respect look like? How do we move on? What is next? Whichever place you find yourself in. And what I can't find it right now, because I'll just tell you that one of the people that I found this from before the election, I don't see them on Facebook right now. And I think this person is probably in grief.
So they've backed out.
They've backed out right now. Yeah. But what the picture was I'm imagining it was a mother talking to a daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And the picture was something like, what happens if they win?
The they being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What happens if they don't? And basically, I'm paraphrasing here, so I may not be getting it all right. But the mother says, girl, whatever happens, we keep doing what we're called to do. We keep going. We keep loving. And I'm definitely paraphrasing here, but we keep going. And Bishop Bickerton, a West Virginian, who is now the bishop in New York, and I believe where the conferences are double. I think it might be New England, but I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. I can look that up and we can fix that, but and talk about it next time. But it's either New England or New Jersey. But he talked about the day after the election that regardless of, we knew somebody was going to win, somebody was going to lose. And this day, the next day, Bishop Bickerton says, I want everybody to give people space and empathy and all that means to be able to care for. But he said then after that, we've got to get back to work. Doesn't mean that all those emotions are going away, but we do have to get back to work. And that means working together the best we can to share the love of God in the places of those who are on the mountaintop and those who are in the valley and those in between.
Well, that's a challenge at best, but I think it makes sense. It's not going to be easy, but that's a way. I don't know. A lot of things Christ calls us to do are not easy, and I think that's on purpose.
Agreed.
Well, I'm at the end of my notes. I think the thought I leave with after going through the 3 sermons is that we have the power to shape the narrative through our actions, our kindness, our compassion, our humility. And now next week, our respect.
Yeah.
And keep that in mind.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of folks are having a lot of different emotions today. And what I want everybody to know that are listening is that we're praying for all of you. And we're praying for our churches. We're praying for our country. And for those who are feeling like not sure that they have a lot of hope right now, that I'm reminded by Frederick Buechner that I say for myself more than I say for the church. But anybody that's been around me for a while now in the church knows that I often paraphrase, the worst thing is not the last thing. And so wherever you find yourself celebrating or feeling despair, that God is with us. And we're getting ready to go into a season of light that reminds us of that. I struggle during this time of season, Mark, with the darkness, the change of time. I really do.
Oh, that kind of season, not the Advent season.
Not the Advent season. But I do believe, I'm grateful that Advent and Christmas happen in a time of darkness, because that's a time when we try to light up our communities. And I actually notice places that I don't usually notice during the regular time of year, during summer and things, because when the lights are on, you see actually houses and areas that you just don't notice, but they light up and
they pop out as individual rather than as just part of the background.
Yeah. And that reminds me that when I drive by there, I don't know if that is a red house or a blue house, but I know there's children of God that live there.
Well, I think for Angela's mental health, we should call this to a close.
I think you're right.
I'm looking forward to next week and continue the conversation.
Until next time, Mark, let's wrap up. The Rev rambles on.
See you in church.